At the end of 2023, I watched literally hundreds of booktube and booktok videos to determine which were the most popular books on the platforms. As I was watching, I was keeping a tally, I had a spreadsheet and everything. I love working in STEM. And you know what? All that work, and what did it get me? Well, this. In all of the yearly wrap-up videos that I could find on booktok and booktube and bookstagram, these were the top 5 most frequently mentioned. So we have got Happy Place by Emily Henry, Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kuang, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, and The Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, as well as Iron Flame, also by Rebecca Yarros. This is kind of like that Spider-Man meme where they're like, wait a minute, in this video I am going to be reading these books. Some of these books have more of a cult following than Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Some of these books have been harder to get this year than Era's tour tickets. And I definitely think these are probably the 5 books I've seen talked about with the most frequency on the platforms. Of course, I use booktok and booktube all the time, but it's time to see how much trust we should give the platform that gave 200 million views to a thirst trap of chocolate-covered strawberries. Sorry, the internet is so unserious, but I'm intrigued to read these books and to share my thoughts on them. So let's go. I read Yellowface, and I sort of feel like, now hear me out, Rebecca F. Kuang might be the Beyonce of the publishing industry. Because there is not a genre that she can't do. Just like we have Lemonade, Renaissance, Cowboy Carter, R.F. Kuang is also able to just seamlessly glide between genres and do a really good job of all of them. Whether that's fantasy, dark academia, literary fiction that reads like a thriller. This is a very satirical book, kind of calling out the problems within the publishing industry from within the publishing industry. I sort of feel like anything Rebecca F. Kuang touches does turn to gold, and this has managed to capture the attention of so many people, and despite, you know, on the surface seeming quite niche, that not that many people would care about publishing industry drama, so many people I know who aren't usually that involved with the book literary landscape have found so much pleasure in reading this. And I think that's a real talent, to be able to contribute to a very specific discourse while also engaging the mass market. That is what Yellowface has done. This is a seething commentary about online discourse, social media, the book world, but also the debate of like cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation. So to set the scene, our main character is a white woman, and her kind of best friend is an Asian writer who is seeing a lot of commercial success, and she's just signed a new book deal. They're celebrating together. Then, and I'm not kidding, this is a genuine plot point, the Asian writer chokes on a pancake and dies. Now, the white woman who is our main character, her name is June, she realizes that there is an unpublished manuscript in the apartment, so she steals it. She makes a few tweaks to this manuscript and then publishes it under her own name, except she changes her name slightly to make it seem a bit more racially ambiguous. So she changes her name to Juniper Song because she believes that minority voices basically get a step up in the publishing industry because people only want to read about oppression. Now, the trouble is she has the same level of media training as Renee Rapp, except Renee Rapp is chaotic good, she is chaotic evil. She sort of fumbles her way through the promo tour for the book, and when people start to act suspicious around her behavior and call out some of her problematic behavior, she just crumbles. She's such a victim, she has such a victim complex, and you are supposed to hate her. Like, she is written to be totally and utterly insufferable. And I think that's a real talent, to make a book compelling whilst making us hate the main character. You know, Jane Austen, for example, when she wrote Emma, she said she wanted to write a character who no one but herself would much like. This book takes that one step further, and even Rebecca F. Kuang would hate this character. So my review, I liked this book. I thought it was a great concept. It got people talking, it started a cultural conversation, and it does read like a thriller, as I said. However, I do think it's about 100 pages too long, and it starts to get a little bit too absurd, when at first it was so tight, it sort of starts to unravel a bit and become a bit absurd, which it didn't really need to do. I think this is a novella that was turned into a novel, and so after a while it becomes a bit repetitive. It kind of really heavy-handedly tells you these points, when I know that Rebecca F. Kuang is a really, really intelligent writer. You know, I've been to her talks many, many times, and the way that she speaks is, she is the most articulate person I think I've ever been in a room with. And watching her speak in front of an audience is watching a whole audience of people fall in love with her brain. She is so absurdly smart and eloquent with the way that she expresses her ideas. And I think that maybe she doubted the intelligence of the reader a little bit too much, because she really, really hammers home all of her points when you can be a little bit more subtle. This had all the subtlety of a reversing dump truck. I especially think if you are chronically online, like myself, you will have heard a lot of these points before. And so by constantly rehashing the same ideas, it does oversimplify them a little bit in order to make sure that everyone gets it. But I think that you have to not doubt the intelligence of your reader so much. What I enjoyed is that I could tell Rebecca F. Kuang was giggling away while she was writing this book. You know, it feels like someone just having so much fun on the page. I just wish it had been more concise and punchy. I will say that R.F. Kuang is one of the most exciting authors in the publishing industry right now. I guess I just don't want her to dumb down her own intellect in order to make sure that her book is more palatable, because it compromises the art itself, I think. So I know that's kind of a mixed review, but I think this is so worth reading. It's also a great book club pick because it does encourage a discussion, and so that's why I can see why it's been so viral on social media, not only because it's weirdly meta, it's talking about that world of social media book commentary, whilst also encouraging more commentary and more discourse. So I think this is a really good book. I just wish it had been shorter, that's all. And now, on to the next. Also, I am very excited to let you know that today's video is kindly brought to you by Skillshare. I love Skillshare. There are thousands of classes available on Skillshare, led by creative professionals, people at the top of their game in the film industry, in illustration, in design. And you know, we're 3 months into 2024 right now. It's a good opportunity to do some self-reflection and think about whether you have been investing in yourself enough this year. Have you got your goals in mind? And Skillshare can help you do that. On Skillshare, you can take your creative passion or your next project to the next level. And if you're not sure where to start, Skillshare actually has these really brilliant learning paths. These are hand-picked classes that are meant to be taken in order that build on one another, so they kind of reinforce the lessons that you're learning, and they help you go from novice to pro in no time at all. And there are learning paths based on design, productivity, creative freelancing, etc. The learning class that I've opted for is Write Powerful Short Fiction. And I found it very inspiring, and the best news is, if you are feeling inspired to invest in yourself, the first 500 people to click the link in the description box down below will get a free month of Skillshare Premium. So head to my link and let me know what learning path you choose. Thank you, Skillshare! Now, I was kind of skeptical about this one because I've had mixed reactions to the other Emily Henry books that I have previously read and encountered and come across. I lost my Emily Henry virginity to this book. This is People We Meet on Vacation. I think in the UK it's actually called You and Me on Vacation. Like, there are two different alternative titles for this book. It's like Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone versus Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone all over again, square brackets, Emily's version. And then I read Book Lovers because so many of you were like, Jack, you are going to love this. But I actually was kind of let down and I really didn't connect with this at all. And before you come for me, that's my opinion! Let me just tell you, this is like a trauma response because I was crucified for my opinion on this book when I last shared it publicly. The Emily Henry fans are a cult. It was scary. I was getting death threats on the internet because I didn't like this book. And you know who's always at the scene of the crime? Book Twitter. It's always them. It's always Book Twitter. Or X, I guess. In fact, I'm glad it's called X because it reminds me, like my ex, it is something I should avoid. Twitter was like, we want this man's head on a spike by the end of the day. We riot at dawn. I was like, I cannot believe I'm getting death threats over a small town romance. This is meant to be wholesome. But all that being said, today I'm very excited to welcome you to the Jack Edwards, Emily Henry reunion episode, the redemption arc. This is enemies to lovers in action. We were enemies. Now we're lovers. I loved this book. We follow this girl who has a fiance, but they have essentially broken up. They're kind of taking an extended break, but it's looking likely they won't be getting back together. She goes for a reunion holiday with all of her best friends, and who turns up? Her fiance. And of course, all of her friends still think that they are together, so they decide to fake it and keep everyone happy. They're like, we'll just pretend that we're still together, that nothing's wrong. And this is the kind of fake dating trope that I enjoy, because often I think that fake dating is so not believable. Often the fake dating trope is giving like Disney Channel original movie vibes, and it really takes me out of it. But this book was nothing like that. It really was so believable. It felt like a very real situation that people could find themselves in. There's also the trope of the second chance romance, and there are two things that I really loved about this book. Firstly, the peripheral characters. My pet peeve is when there are side characters in the plot that don't add anything to the novel. In this book, that was not the case. The side characters add so much texture, you really believe in their friendship. There are loads of little anecdotes and stories of all of the trouble that they got into, all of the fun that they've had, and it means that you're just really, really rooting for them. Those details mean that the stakes in this book are high, and often I find that when all the side characters and the relationships aren't fully developed, we don't have those little anecdotes. The author doesn't do the extra effort to fill in the outline with colour. It just means that the stakes are so low. Sometimes those stakes are so low, they're raw. They're undercooked. In here, delicious. Medium rare, nice. And the other thing I liked about this book is that it's about the concept of home and how we find home in the people around us, in our friendships. Sometimes people can feel like home just as much as a place can, and the way that kind of gives us hope, because it means that home is a portable thing. Home is something we can experience anywhere if we're with the right people who bring us that feeling. It made me feel all soppy and gooey. This is my favourite Emily Henry book so far by a long, long way. I did not see this coming, but you know what? Thank you, BookTok. Thank you, BookTube. This is just a reminder to stay open-minded, and sometimes you may not enjoy one book by an author, but that doesn't mean you won't enjoy any of their future books. So yeah, happy place for me was a smash. And now on to the next book. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is a book I would recommend tomorrow and today and yesterday and next week and June next year and Easter and Halloween and Christmas. It's just such a good book. This book is about two people who meet in hospital when they're children, and they bond over their love for video games, and then they meet again years later in their adult lives, reconnect and start a video game company together. The title, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, takes its name from Macbeth. It's an allusion to Shakespeare, and I think the point of Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, this kind of endless cycle, is that video game worlds offer infinite possibilities, and that safe space you can find in a virtual reality where anything is possible. In contrast to the real world, where there are finite possibilities and consequences, and you can't just regenerate and start again and try again. You know, you get one shot at this life. And I think that juxtaposition of those two ideas is crucial to this book. The characters are believable, they're raw, they are flawed, they make mistakes, they do things wrong, they upset each other, they say the wrong thing, but I think that makes them more believable, it makes them more real. And what I liked about this book is that it really is about friendship and the power of friendship. There are love stories within the book, but it's not in itself a romance or a story that centers romantic love. I think it centers a love for creation, a love for collaboration, but also dissects the human spirit, and the different friends that they make along the way, the different people that come and go in their lives are also really interesting and fascinating storylines. I think this book is experimental in the best possible way. There's a section where we are inside a video game, which I think goes on for slightly too long, but is really interesting. There's also scenes where the perspective changes. At one point we're in the second person. So it's one of those rare books which actually does often do very well on BookTube and BookTok, where it is very literary and appeals to a literary audience who are looking at kind of the craft of writing, as well as people who want pure escapism and entertainment value. It kind of has both of those things, kind of like books like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo or The Song of Achilles. Those are books that are compelling to read because the plot is fast-paced and interesting and keeps changing, and there are twists and turns, but they're also so meticulously and beautifully crafted, and I think this book kind of joins that canon. I will say there are so many references to video games over time. It's very well researched, but I don't think you need to be a big gamer to get into this book. Like, I'm definitely not someone who plays a lot of video games. Did I have my Animal Crossing era during the pandemic? Yes. Did I one time trespass into a graveyard because I was playing Pokemon Go? Yes. Did I used to make my brother cry when he was literally 3 years old because I would thrash him at FIFA? Yes. So I've dabbled in games. Also, I have this app on my phone called Falling Balls, and it genuinely is what keeps me sane. Like, I think everyone has their one emotional support app. Mine is Falling Balls. If you've never played Falling Balls, you are severely missing out. It's so much fun. I'm actually very good at it. I have a very small skill set, but this is definitely one of the things I am good at. Anyway, I've totally derailed what I was talking about. You don't need to know a lot about games to enjoy this book. The way it looks at the human spirit and human relationships and communication or miscommunication is deeply nuanced. You really go on a journey with Sadie and Sam, who are the two kind of central protagonists, and it's one that you can just tell has been poured over with so much passion. It's a book I would definitely reread, and it's also a book that I have bought copies of for like 4 or 5 different people. Like, I don't think I've ever gifted a copy of a book so many times. It's a reliable book that you know people are going to have a fun time with, or at least will have lots of things to say about it. There's also a scene which is devastating. Like, I It took me 3 to 5 working days to recover from that. If you know, you know. I just think it's a great mix of all of those things. So that is tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. See you tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. So probably the most talked about books of the past year have got to be these two. But kind of in the way that the Willy Wonka experience in Scotland is the most talked about thing on the internet too. So much anticipation, so much anticlimax. And Rebecca Yarros did have me feeling like that depressed Oompa Loompa by the end of Iron Flame. And quite frankly, I wish these books had stayed the unknown. So we'll start off with The Fourth Wing. This book took me a little while to get into, but by the end of it, I was like, okay, I get it. We follow a girl called Violet because of course a fantasy character would have the name Violet. The trouble is, she is quite annoying. Like absurdly annoying. Like I kept thinking, I actually wouldn't mind if you fell off that dragon. While it might be painful for you, it would make this whole thing less painful for me. And the tone of this book is what I can only describe as determined. Like every character is so determined all of the time. And because the tone of the book is always very intense, like it's always very highly strung, and everyone is taking themselves so seriously, it kind of causes a bit of a pacing problem. Because in a narrative, you need peaks and you need troughs so that the peaks feel bigger. That is the purpose of the troughs, for us to get to know the characters, for us to be rooting for them, and so that we feel the intensity of the climax peaks. But because this book is constantly so high frequency, you don't really get that change. And that means that the climaxes aren't actually as impactful as they should be, because quite minor moments are treated with the same level of intensity. So for me, it just fell a little bit flat. Also, the academy that she attends uses some pretty odd tactics, in my opinion. I don't know a lot about military training, but this is kind of a survival of the fittest kind of thing. Like the students literally die at the school if they can't keep up. If they fail the challenges, they just die. Like I said, I don't know much about military strategy, but that doesn't seem like the most effective way of building an army. Like letting the weakest links die in training rather than on the battlefield doesn't feel like the most effective use of manpower. The whole time I couldn't help but feeling that that was a little bit of a waste, you know? And it also means that we become a little too desensitized to central characters in this book dying. So again, it loses impact over time. So there are some pretty gaping plot holes. Describing a book as gaping is not good. But overall, I think The Fourth Wing does work until it all falls apart in book 2. This is where you realize that the story world that's been created just isn't strong enough to last the test of time in the way that something like Harry Potter does, where you can read 7 books of that and not be bored. And the trouble is, instead of trying to build and expand on what she had created in book 1, Rebecca Yarros tries to replicate, and it doesn't work. She tries to carbon copy book 1 into book 2. It follows the exact same structure, it has the same narrative arcs, but also inherits all of the major plot holes of the first book. And the thing is, the big redemption of book 1 is the fiery enemies to lovers romance in the novel. And I think what happened was, because the first book was such a success, they just said, let's just do that exact same thing again. And so in the first book, they go from enemies to lovers, and in order to replicate that, at the beginning of this book, they have to become enemies again, which to me just didn't really make sense. Like trying to repeat that dynamic was really odd. Instead of expanding and growing, we regress and we go back to the basics, we go back to square one. I didn't really understand why. To me, that just felt lazy. And to add insult to injury, the book is so sloppily written. It is actually bad. It feels like it was rushed. I feel about as enthusiastic about this book as Dakota Johnson did about Madam Web. This was just a bit bad. So much potential, but she fumbled the bag with this book, because this had the success and popularity to become one of the biggest series of all time, I think. Tomato, tomato, boo, hiss. I would boo this off the stage. And I'm sorry to say it, I definitely will not be reading the next book in this series. You could not pay me to put myself through this again. So, in my ranking of these 5 books that I read that were recommended on booktube and booktok, there are absolutely no prizes for guessing that this would be in 5th place. Then I will say there's a bit of a gap, and then The Fourth Wing, then a massive gap, then then I think it's gonna be Yellowface. These two for me are very close in that ranking, also very difficult to compare to one another. So let's say these two kind of draw, but if I was forced to pick, like gun to my head, I think in second place I would put Happy Place by Emily Henry, and then my personal winner would be Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. You have been promoted. You are now one of my elite employees. I didn't find any like completely perfect 5 out of 5 star books in this video, like I have when I've made videos on BookTok before, but these three I would definitely recommend. It's kind of ironic that these two are gold and bronze because they did not place. They were not on the medals table, they were not on the podium. You know that new Ariana Grande video where she like erases things from her brain? If I could do that, I would. Anyways, I'm glad that I read these 3 books. I still have faith in BookTok and BookTube. I do think we can trust them. And of course, the beauty is that you can curate your own For You page, and the creators I follow are making thought-provoking, interesting, fascinating videos, and I get so many cracking recommendations from my favorite creators. So let me know in the comment section who your favorite creators are on YouTube, on TikTok. Don't forget you can subscribe to this YouTube channel as well as my second channel, Jack in the Books. And of course, follow me over on TikTok, it's Jack_Edwards. Thank you so much for watching. As well as your favorite creators, let me know your favorite book recommendation you've got from BookTube and BookTok. Let me know your thoughts on these books, and let's continue the conversation in the comment section down below. All the best, stay in touch, have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.